Well, welcome, Daphne, and thank you for taking the time out today to come and do this interview with us. Very nice having you here.
Thank you for having me.
So, let's start by reflecting on the last year. So, a lot has happened in society. Have been some of the biggest changes for you?
So, the biggest changes for me have probably revolved around my education. So, I've had to experience remote learning, I've had to experience learning whilst in self isolation. I've also had a lot of my extracurricular activities either cancelled or postponed.
And that's been a lot in the news lately, talking about especially year 12 students. And this is supposed to be one of your memorable years of high school where you guys are all still together. And how do you think other young people who are in year 12 or even younger, how has this also impacted them?
I think that all of these things, plus the added uncertainty of, being in the middle of a global pandemic, has contributed to, mental health implications for young people where, they are feeling isolated, they're not feeling as socially connected to those around them. So I think that that's been, a major change. But like in saying that, I think young people are also becoming so much more resilient because we are in unprecedented times. And I guess it's something new for most people in society. So I think, young people are learning new skills, reaching out to friends and family when we wouldn't normally be, taking up new ways of communication, via, Zoom and like teleconference and talking to people that way as well.
Absolutely. In the last few years, we've seen a lot of advocacy coming through the younger generation, such as Greta Thunberg. And just more from your perspective, do you feel that young people are being heard in society?
Well, I think at this point in time, there's no direct way for young people's voices to be fed up to federal parliament. So, if our politicians are the ones, making change, making policies, enacting laws, creating change for our society, if young people's voices aren't being heard through, a medium such as a federal youth advisory board, then they're not being listened to enough. And I think that there's definitely some change that we can make, but also ensuring that when we do have mechanisms such as a youth advisory board, we need to ensure that we are listening to a diverse range of young people. So, Indigenous young people of colour, young people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. So I don't think they're being listened to enough at the moment. And I think that, mechanisms like this that actually look at and amplify the voices of a diverse range of young people could be really beneficial. And I think that's something that we need to implement.
As an antidote to what you just mentioned as well, Daphne, can you tell us a little bit more about the Youth Ambassador program that UNICEF has basically started?
So the Young Ambassador program involves having ambassadors across Australia listening and consulting with children and young people. And the whole point of this is to have, a peer-to-peer model where we have young people listening to young people, understanding what their experiences are, understanding what their concerns are, and then speaking to key politicians and decision makers and ensuring that they do make informed policy decisions when it comes to young people. So, when politicians are making policies around education or climate change, or the foster care system or youth justice services, we need to ensure that they are making informed policy decisions when they do make these decisions. And the Young Ambassador program is a way to actually amplify those voices and ensure that those policies are informed.
So there's a lot of challenges that we have right now, such as problems within the economy, of course, climate change. You talked about mental health as an issue as well. What are some of the key topics that you think a lot of young Australians are going through at this present time?
Well, I think, with the current pandemic, young people are like really concerned about mental health. They're concerned about their friends, they're concerned about their family members that they're unable to see, whether that be because of health reasons or border restrictions. So I think that that's a really important issue that many young people are concerned about at the moment. But in addition to that, we also see young people concerned about the economy. They're worried about the current recession. They understand the social impacts that the economy has upon our communities in Australia. And I guess something that is still at the forefront of young people's minds is climate change. I think that, that will be much more of a long-term concern for young people because eventually this pandemic will be over and it'll end. But climate change is still a pressing issue, and I think that many young people are still concerned about it.
You also touched on it a little bit when you were talking about the economy and young people. That's also the biggest group when it comes to unemployment now within society too. And you talked about maybe through this pandemic that, with the agile way of learning, that also people are developing more skill set and looking at different ways to learn a new skill as well. Do you see in terms of going into college and or university and finishing year 12, that this is also still a big issue when it comes to unemployment and the youth generation?
Well, I think it's something that many young people are concerned about. They're concerned about whether there are going to be jobs for them, at the end of the year, especially coming up to that summer holiday break. They're concerned about, what's going to happen after university. So we've had recent university fee increases to the humanities degree. So, that's also something many young people are worried about because they, if you want to go out and do a degree in a humanities subject, they still, want to go and pursue these degrees. So that's also something they're worried about. And there are young people who are considering going into teaching and STEM and those job ready degrees as well. We need to question whether the government are actually listening to young people and making those decisions, because at the end of the day, when young people want to go and pursue their desired careers, and we don't even know if those careers are going to be careers in like 20 years from now, because we're seeing so many new jobs come up and arise. But they need to be consulting with young people. They need to be listening to young people. And I think that's a key way that they can actually make, effective decisions when it comes to young people and jobs for the future.
You're right on the money with that answer, because what you're starting to see a lot now is a lot of young entrepreneurs, and they're coming up with solutions to problems that we have today, but also in the future. And like when you talked about, some of those skill set or those jobs, we don't even know what they are, but in consulting with young people, is again, you're starting to see this entrepreneurship and all of these new solutions of how we should be thinking forward. So the consultation, I think, is a really good point. Can you please tell me more about Plastic Free July?
So Plastic Free July is an initiative I participate in every year with my local Girl Guide unit. And what we do is we minimise all single-use plastics for the entire month of July. And what this did for me personally was it made me more conscious of how much plastic I was consuming as an individual. And I think that a lot of my peers felt the same way. And I think it's a great initiative. I think it's a great program, and I think that when we get more people involved with Plastic Free July, they're able to become more conscious of the decisions they're making, and hopefully reduce plastic use at an individual level.
Is there any kind of advice or any type of ways that you think we can be more conscious about our waste, not just plastic, but other waste streams every month?
Yes, definitely. I think that there are easy small changes that everybody can make as individuals. So for instance, most people have a coffee every day when they go to work. So taking your own reusable coffee cup. I also think just small changes such as using metal straws or perhaps biodegradable wheat straws instead of those plastic straws that you get when you do go to stores, because at the end of the day that's cheap, but if we bring our own items, like, we might be able to actually reduce waste that way. In addition to that, I'd also say that there's also easy things that you can do when you go to have your school lunch or your lunch at your workplace. So for instance, I know a lot of my friends and I, we bring beeswax wraps to school, and we wrap our food in them because it's just an alternative to things like plastic cling wrap or foil. I also think that when we do look at things at a community level or a local level, we can look at the bins that we have at schools. So, having a general waste bin and a recycling bin. I know that not every school has those two options there. So I think that also having those options there, so we are reducing waste as a community, but also having a look at perhaps what's in your school canteen. Are there plastic things there? Is there something you can do to actually reduce that waste? And when it comes to businesses as well, perhaps looking at sustainable packaging, or also things like advertising. Like, would it be more cost effective to instead have an electronic screen instead of printing out posters and advertising materials that way? So I think there are lots of small changes that are quick and easy that will reduce waste for our communities, but also for our individuals.
I like your answer so much because it is a lot of small actions, and it's just everybody reflecting on how we can do more, how we can be better. And one of the things that I've seen through this pandemic, as an example, we were going towards the right direction when everyone started coming with their own coffee mugs to the barista. And then, of course, due to the situation, some baristas refused to do that. But then how do we bring back the conversation of when is the right time to transition back, so then we don't keep the momentum? So I think what you mentioned in terms of all these small things as to the waste bins and consistency amongst schools when it comes to recycling or separating waste. If we just did that, like, how much we can actually reduce our footprint. Very good. How can we really promote a zero waste lifestyle? Like, if we were thinking of a campaign or a big movement within Australia, what were What would be some ways about it that you think would be really effective?
Well, I think that, social media is a really effective way of doing so. Most people are on social media, and actually having, infographics or calling people to, take action or perhaps reduce waste, just easy small steps that, people can easily understand and take on board. I think that could be a really effective way. Another thing is that at my school a few years ago, we ran a movie screening. And with this movie screening, we actually aired before the flood. So, it's a movie about climate change. It raises awareness about the environment. And, I go to a girls' school. So we had all these girls rush in. Whether it was because of the movie or whether it was because Leonardo DiCaprio was in the movie is debatable. But we raised so much money because of that. And people actually came, and they became informed about the effects of climate change. They became informed about, protecting our environment. And I think that that's another effective way at a community level to actually raise awareness about the effects of climate change, about the effects of, if we don't take action against protecting our environment. And I think that that could also be a really effective way at informing young people, informing people in general about the effects, and therefore, I guess, promoting that zero waste lifestyle by demonstrating this is what happens if we don't take action.
I like the example you gave because you more looked at how can we engage within our audience? How can we resonate with the topic that we know would make them feel personally attached to it? So that's a really good example. Where do you look for inspiration society and who do you look up to?
Well, I think, being a UNICEF Young Ambassador and talking to so many young people, it's honestly young people that I look up to, and hearing from so many different, diverse young people, hearing about their experiences, their concerns, how passionate they are about pressing issues in society. I think that at the end of the day, those are the people that I look up to the most. And I think, it's really promising to see that the future generations of people that we have, our future leaders, I think those are the people I look up to the most, and they really do inspire me.
IKEA and UNICEF has had a long relationship. Can you tell us a little bit more about UNICEF and the work that you guys do?
So UNICEF works to promote child rights. In fact, they're actually mandated by the Children's Convention on the Rights of the Child. So UNICEF works to ensure that every child around the world survives and thrives. And I think it's a really important organization that actually elevates the voices of young people, ensures that they're able to have full access to their full set of rights. And I mean, in specifically regarding the Young Ambassador program, we specifically work with Article 12 of that convention, which states that children have a right to say what they think should happen when decisions are being made that impact upon them. So, when we talk about climate change, they're the future of the planet. So climate change inherently impacts upon children and young people. Australia actually ratified this convention in December 1990. So we have an obligation to actually, abide by the convention. But unfortunately, when we do have politicians and decision makers fail to consider the views of young people, they ignore this article when it suits. And unfortunately, it does suit quite often.
It's actually very similar to a part of our People and Planet Positive strategy where we do have a change driver called Fair and Inclusive. And it looks at not just young people, but when it comes to all people in society and how are they treated when it comes to equality, diversity, being included in a lot of these discussions. And that is so important to IKEA. And I see why the relationship between IKEA and UNICEF has been around for so long. It's because we see a lot in terms of the youth within the world is actually the most important people as they are our future. And a lot of the development and successes we'll have going forward as humankind actually comes from this generation. The relationship between IKEA and UNICEF has been going on for some time, but of course there's opportunities that we can be better as a business as well as other businesses in giving opportunities such as today for young people to have their voice. Do you have any ideas of how we can move together with the young peoples in society, whether it's government, whether it's businesses, and what are some forums that you think are really important to have that platform to speak up?
Well, I think, first of all, talking to young people, listening to young people, and having that, attitude shift where there is a willingness to listen to young people is really important for businesses and governments to do. And I think this is an example of it right here. So I think IKEA are doing a lot and they're truly leading the way, particularly when we look at sustainability and businesses. And, if you kind of link that to the issues surrounding climate change, young people are truly at the heart of the fight for climate justice. And I think IKEA are doing tremendously when you look at everything they're doing with sustainability, everything you're doing with actually, providing solar panels for stores and units across Australia. I think, these are key decisions that many businesses need to kind of look to IKEA to actually make in order to support young people in this fight for climate justice. So I think, when we look at the issue of climate change, that's a key way that businesses can support young people in this fight. But I also think that businesses and governments together have to actually consider young people as equal stakeholders in society, consider that they have important things to say, and they need to be able to voice the views of young people. So I think that's something that governments and businesses can definitely work on. And I think that when we do look at climate change, sustainability, looking after the environment, businesses truly need to take that step up and, I guess, follow IKEA's lead in becoming a sustainable business in supporting young people in this fight for climate justice.
I like what you just said, Daphne, because I think what IKEA has reflected on when we came out with our People and Planet Positive strategy over a decade ago was that our business model had to change. In order to do growth or sustainable growth, we had to take into consideration what does the future look like with climate change? How do we adapt? How do we need to change our business model? And we don't know how to do that. We're best specialists in how to sell furniture. But like you said, listening to young people, understanding what's happening out there in the market, and actually adapting over time and having a strategy of where we want to go, which is, again, zero emissions policy, the SDGs, again, looking at the UN nation, and where we want to go when it comes to climate change. We then had to reflect on our business and then what do we need to change in terms from our whole supply chain to how we want to produce our furniture. So thank you so much for that answer. This has been such a great conversation, Daphne, and actually you've inspired me a lot. I feel with all your answers, your passion and your positivity and your smile comes through, and it's a topic that is a lot of confusion right now. How do we approach it? But I think your optimism comes through and that it's never too late and there's small things that we can do today. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.